In a quiet laboratory at Yale University, nestled among the ivy-covered buildings and the whispering trees, a psychological drama was about to unfold. A drama that would reveal the terrifying depths of human obedience and the capacity for cruelty hidden within us all. This is the story of the Milgram Experiment, a chilling exploration of human nature, conducted by a man whose curiosity would uncover a darkness even he had not fully anticipated. The year was 1961, a time when the world was still grappling with the horrors of the Holocaust. The trial of Adolf Eichmann, a Nazi officer responsible for the logistics of mass extermination, was underway in Jerusalem. As the world listened in shock to Eichmann's defense that he was simply following orders, a young social psychologist named Stanley Milgram was struck by a burning question. Could ordinary people, under the right circumstances, commit atrocities simply because they were told to do so? Was evil a matter of individual choice, or could it be manufactured through the machinery of authority? Milgram, a soft-spoken man with sharp, searching eyes, decided to find out. He designed an experiment that would challenge the moral fabric of its participants and force them to confront their own capacity for harm. He recruited volunteers from the general public, ordinary men and women, who answered a simple ad in the local paper. They were told they would be participating in a study about learning and memory, but the truth was far more sinister. The participants were led into a sterile laboratory where they were greeted by a stern, gray-haired man in a white lab coat. The man, an actor playing the role of the experimenter, exuded an air of authority that immediately set the tone. Beside him was another man, the learner, a kindly middle-aged gentleman with a nervous smile. The participants were informed that the experiment was about the effects of punishment on learning. They would be assigned the role of the teacher, while the learner would be strapped into a chair in an adjacent room, hooked up to a machine that could deliver electric shocks. The teacher was instructed to read a series of word pairs to the learner. If the learner failed to remember the correct pair, the teacher was to administer an electric shock, increasing the voltage with each mistake. The machine in front of the teacher had a series of switches, each labeled with a voltage level, from a mild 15 volts to a terrifying 450 volts. The labels grew more ominous as the shocks increased. Slight shock, moderate shock, danger, severe shock, and finally, XXX. The participants believed they were administering real shocks to a real person. What they didn't know was that the learner was part of the experiment, an actor who would simulate pain with increasing intensity. As the shocks escalated, the learner would begin to cry out, pleading for the experiment to stop, pounding on the walls, and eventually falling ominously silent. Yet, the man in the lab coat would calmly instruct the teacher to continue, insisting that the experiment requires that you continue. As the shocks intensified, many participants began to show signs of distress. Sweat formed on their brows, their hands trembled as they gripped the switches. Some would turn to the man in the lab coat, their voices quavering with uncertainty. "Do I have to continue?" they would ask, desperate for a way out. But the response was always the same, delivered in a steady, unwavering tone. "Please continue. The experiment requires it." What followed was a chilling testament to the power of authority and the frailty of human conscience. Despite their evident discomfort, the majority of the participants obeyed. They pressed the switches, one after another, even as the screams from the learner grew more anguished, more desperate. Some participants would laugh nervously, a thin veneer of humor masking their anxiety, while others would try to justify their actions, muttering under their breath that they were just following orders. A few brave souls resisted, refusing to continue as the cries grew louder. But they were the minority. Most, when faced with the calm, insistent commands of the man in the white coat, found themselves compelled to continue, to push the button, to deliver the shocks. Milgram watched from behind a one-way mirror, his face tense, as the results of his experiment unfolded before him. What he saw was both fascinating and horrifying. Over 65% of the participants continued to administer shocks all the way up to 450 volts, even when the learner had fallen silent, perhaps unconscious or worse. They continued because they were told to, because an authority figure assured them it was necessary, because they believed that responsibility for their actions had been handed over to someone else. They continued, even as their hearts pounded and their hands shook, because they did not want to disobey. Milgram's experiment revealed a dark truth about human nature, that under the right conditions, ordinary people are capable of extraordinary cruelty. The subjects were not sadists or sociopaths. They were everyday individuals, teachers, clerks, salesmen, who believed they were participating in a harmless, scientific study. Yet, when instructed by an authority figure, they were willing to inflict pain, to obey commands, even when those commands ran counter to their moral beliefs. The aftermath of the experiment left a profound impact on those who had taken part. Many participants were visibly shaken, haunted by the ease with which they had surrendered their conscience. Some could barely speak when debriefed, their faces ashen as they were told the truth, that the shocks had not been real, that the learner was an actor, that they had not truly harmed anyone. The relief was palpable, but so was the realization they had been willing to. Milgram's findings sent shockwaves through the world of psychology and beyond. His work was condemned by some as unethical, a cruel manipulation of his subjects' trust. Others praised it as a groundbreaking exploration of the human psyche, a necessary if uncomfortable glimpse into the darker corners of the mind. Milgram himself faced criticism, grappling with the implications of his findings. Had he uncovered a universal truth, or had he merely exposed a wound that would never fully heal? As you listen to the story of the Milgram experiment, consider the power of authority and the fragility of morality. Think about the buttons we push, the commands we obey, and the choices we make in the name of compliance. Remember, in the end, that the capacity for horror is not in the machines we build, but in the hands that operate them, in the minds that allow them to continue. The most terrifying monsters are not those who lurk in the shadows, but those who exist within us all.